Imagine for a second that it's you.
Okay.
You are walking out of your beautiful mansion, stepping right into the morning sun. You're tending to your perfectly manicured gardens, looking out over a compound with clean pathways, a green car in the driveway, and livestock just quietly grazing in the distance.
Sounds pretty idyllic, honestly.
Right. To anyone looking from the outside, you have it all. But weighing heavily on your mind, you're carrying a secret. And this secret is about to completely dismantle a 7-year-old lie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That is the exact scenario at the center of our deep dive today into the factual account detailed in Robbers of Life, Chapter 10.
It's a heavy one.
It really is. Our mission today is to unravel a startling true story that begins with a deathbed confession, uncovers a brutal crime hidden literally behind the walls of a church, and, follows the extraordinary lengths a newly widowed woman went to just to free an innocent man.
And we have an incredibly detailed first-hand account of the events surrounding Kandundu Church to guide us.
Right.
Because this narrative, it moves far beyond a simple misunderstanding or like a tragic accident.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at a massive illicit cocaine dispute.
Choking. Yeah.
Exactly. A laborer who was methodically framed to take the fall, and a fractured community searching for a way to rewrite its own history.
It's intense.
It is. The source material provides this fascinating lens into the systemic power dynamics that allow a crime like this to be covered up, and the sociological mechanisms required to finally bring the truth to light.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the way this investigation begins is it's entirely grounded in the really mundane details of grief.
Yeah, the everyday stuff.
Right, which makes the disruption that follows so much more jarring. We start with the dying words of a guilty man. It's a Tuesday morning. The clock on the wall says it is exactly 10:05 a.m.
Very specific.
Exactly 1 week after her husband's burial. So Mrs. Kiandandu is in her mid-40s, described in the source as a beautiful woman with a light complexion. And she's dressed for work around the house, like she's wearing a green t-shirt, a headscarf, white rubber shoes, and a liso.
Which is a vibrant, traditional East African printed fabric, usually fitted at the waist, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
She has just come back inside from watering the flowers on her husband's freshly dug grave.
Which is such a striking image. Because she is fully immersed in the rituals of mourning.
Yeah.
These actions like watering the grave, keeping the house in order, they're psychological grounding techniques.
That makes sense.
When a person loses a spouse, especially a highly respected community figure, they often cling to routine just to maintain a sense of normalcy, to honor the legacy of the deceased.
But that normalcy is about to just evaporate.
Completely.
She goes into her lavishly furnished sitting room, and the source paints this picture of real wealth. Expensive sofas, a plasma TV, a dining table with curved chairs.
Status symbols, basically.
Exactly. But hanging over all of this is a large portrait of her late husband, Pastor Kiandandu. And the text notes that his eyes seem to follow whoever's in the room.
Oh, that's creepy.
Right. Under that watchful gaze, she opens a small notebook. And she reads aloud the 5 scribbled words her husband struggled to say before dying.
And those words were?
Please, the gardener, Kandundu, Karanja, jail, innocent.
Wow. Those specific words read like a desperate data dump from a failing hard drive.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, there is no grammar, there's no complete sentence to soften the blow. It is just raw data.
Yeah.
A location, a name, a status, and a verdict.
It makes me think of, discovering that a massive lie is actually the load-bearing wall of your entire house.
Ooh, yeah.
You can't just remove it without risking the total collapse of your financial security, your social standing, and honestly, your own identity.
Because she has a lot to lose.
So much. Mrs. Kiandandu has the mansion, the farm, the respect of the congregation. These 5 words force her into a terrifying corner. She either ignores the structural damage or she swings the sledgehammer and brings her own perfect life crashing down.
And what's fascinating here is her immediate behavioral response.
Yeah, what does she do?
Well, the overwhelming human instinct in a situation involving immense wealth and potential scandal is self-preservation.
Naturally.
The psychological phenomenon of motivated reasoning often kicks in, right? She could have easily convinced herself that he was simply delirious in his final moments.
Oh, for sure. People do that all the time.
Exactly. She could have just burned the notebook to protect his legacy. But instead, by 10:05 a.m., she changes into a gray skirt suit and black shoes, grabs her handbag, locks her gate, and gets into her green car.
She goes to investigate.
She actively chooses to verify the data.
Because she knows the only place to verify a cryptic note about Kandundu Church is the physical scene of the crime itself.
Right.
So she drives straight there. Now, Pastor Moriyama is currently running the church. He'd been transferred back the previous year.
And he'd done a lot of good, from what the source says.
Yeah, the source notes he had successfully restored the church's glory. The building is newly painted, flowers are planted, trust is returning to the congregation.
A fresh start.
Exactly. So Mrs. Kiandandu and the new pastor go into the vestry to discuss this riddle. But the person holding the answers isn't the pastor she goes to meet.
No, it's not.
It's someone eavesdropping in the hallway.
And the architecture of the moment is crucial here.
How so?
Well, the vestry door is open, which allows these supposedly private confessions to bleed out into public spaces.
Right.
Sitting right outside that door is Sarah. And Sarah is the narrator of our source material.
Right, the one telling the story.
Exactly. She is a recent college graduate with a degree in education. She's exhausted after 7 months of searching for employment, and she's just sitting there hoping to get a job recommendation from the pastor.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time. Or maybe the wrong time. Because the door's open, Sarah overhears Mrs. Kiandandu asking about a gardener named Karanja who might be in jail.
Yeah.
And Sarah knows exactly who Karanja is, and she knows the horrific truth behind his imprisonment.
But there's a catch.
A huge catch. Before she speaks up, she reveals something deeply unsettling to the reader. Her father knew the truth about Karanja this entire time.
For 7 years.
For 7 long years. Instead of going to the police, her father just lived with the guilt and opted to visit Karanja in Himiti maximum prison.
Which, for context, is one of Kenya's most notorious and heavily fortified correctional facilities.
It's brutal. So, I mean, the psychological burden of carrying a secret like that must be immense.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Sarah's father was likely paralyzed by the sheer terror of Pastor Kiandandu's influence.
Right.
We are talking about a man who wielded not just spiritual authority over a congregation, but, as we soon discover, possessed a highly violent, hidden empire.
Yeah, the dark side.
So the father's visits to community were basically a coping mechanism. It was his way of managing his crushing cognitive dissonance. He was trying to offer a token of comfort because he lacked the courage to actually dismantle the pastor's machine.
But wait, I have to push back here a little bit. Is it really just fear of violence, or are we looking at a deeply ingrained systemic class issue?
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Because, I mean, if Karanja had been another wealthy, influential pastor instead of a working-class gardener, do you really think Sarah's father would have stayed quiet for 7 years?
Right.
It feels like the silence was enabled because the victim was someone society already undervalued.
That is a highly perceptive distinction.
Okay.
And you are entirely correct to point out the sociological hierarchy at play.
It just feels so unfair.
It is. The fear of violence is compounded by the marginalization of the victim. In heavily stratified societies, the imprisonment of a laborer doesn't disrupt the social order the way the imprisonment of an elite would.
Nobody notices when the gardener goes missing.
Precisely. Sarah's father likely calculated, consciously or subconsciously, that risking his own family's safety just wasn't worth it for a gardener. The system is literally designed to make the Karanjas of the world invisible.
Wow. But that invisibility shatters the moment Pastor Moriyama steps out of the vestry.
Yes, it does.
He sees Sarah, asks if she remembers the events from years ago, and she just drops the bombshell. She confirms Karanja was a gardener, that he was framed for murdering a girl right there in the church, and that he is serving a life sentence at Kamiti.
All out in the open.
The private confessions finally reach a critical mass, forcing the narrative out of the shadows and straight into the legal system.
And this transition is where the momentum of justice really takes over.
Because a deathbed confession isn't enough.
Exactly. A deathbed confession is hearsay. A bystander's memory is anecdotal. But when you combine the widow's resources with the bystander's testimony, you suddenly have the foundational elements required to challenge a closed legal case.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Kiandandu hires a lawyer. She galvanizes Sarah's father and the murdered girl's parents, the girl's name was Tabitha, to finally break their silence.
7 years later.
It all culminates in a Monday hearing at the Corinda Law Courts. This is where the anatomy of the frame-up is laid bare. We finally hear exactly how an innocent man lost 7 years of his life.
The courtroom testimony provides the mechanical breakdown of the crime.
Paint the picture for us.
Okay, so we learn that on a Wednesday afternoon, 7 years prior, Karanja was simply doing his job. He was watering freshly planted flowers.
Just a normal day.
Right. Then Pastor Kiandandu arrived in his car with a young woman named Tabitha.
And Karanja had actually seen Tabitha the week before, arguing with the pastor.
Huh.
But on this specific Wednesday, the argument exploded into something much darker. Tabitha was accusing the pastor of losing 100 kilos of cocaine
100 kilos.
in 2 separate deals. She was lamenting unpaid deliveries and actively threatening to tear down the pastor's entire empire.
And that detail, the introduction of 100 kilos of cocaine, completely reframes the pastor's identity.
Obviously.
He is utilizing the church not just as a spiritual cover, but as a logistical front for a massive narcotics operation.
It's wild.
And when an illicit supply chain of that magnitude is threatened, the response is almost always immediate and lethal.
So Karanja hears the screaming. He sees the pastor grab Tabitha by the throat, and Karanja actually tries to intervene. He's begging the pastor to calm down.
But it backfires.
Badly, the pastor turns on him. At knife point, the pastor forces Tabitha to tie Karanja to a chair.
This part is so disturbing.
It really is. And the material used for the bindings is what really stands out in the source.
Yeah.
He orders her to use sisal thread from a big carton in the corner of the room. And that carton contained Bibles donated by the Bible Society of Kenya for the youth.
The operational efficiency of the pastor in that moment is deeply disturbing.
He's so cold about it.
He doesn't panic. He utilizes whatever materials are immediately available to secure the environment, even if they're religious materials.
It is the ultimate clash of the sacred and the profane.
Truly.
You have a man hiding behind a clerical collar, using the literal packaging of spiritual salvation to facilitate a brutal drug-related murder.
Wow. Right.
Once Karanja is bound hands and feet, the pastor strangles Tabitha right in front of him.
Good Lord.
He drags her body into the main church, comes back, takes off his own necktie, and gags Karanja with it.
And the premeditation of the frame-up becomes so evident in what happens next.
What does he do?
The pastor locks the doors and leaves Karanja tied to a chair in the vestry overnight. From past 4:00 p.m. until 7:30 a.m. the next morning, Karanja sits in the dark with a corpse in the next room.
That is literal psychological torture.
It is. The pastor uses those 15 hours to solidify his alibi and construct a narrative that will inevitably shift the blame.
When he returns at 7:30 a.m., he unties Karanja, puts his own tie back in his pocket, and calls the police.
Right.
And when law enforcement arrives, Karanja's defense is completely futile.
We have to examine the mechanism of how the police process that crime scene.
Let's do it.
It is a textbook example of the halo effect.
The halo effect.
Yeah, it's a cognitive bias where a person's status or title positively influences how their character and claims are evaluated.
Oh, of course.
Law enforcement officers arrived at a place of worship. They saw a well-dressed, authoritative religious figure pointing the finger at a disheveled manual laborer.
So they didn't even question it.
Barely. The officers' cognitive heuristics bypassed the need for deep forensic investigation because the narrative aligned perfectly with their inherent social biases. The pastor's authority completely overrode the truth.
But inside the Corinda law courts, those biases are finally dismantled.
Thankfully.
The judge hears the overwhelming consensus of new testimony. Mrs. Kiandandu speaks against her own late husband's estate.
Which is huge.
Massive. Sarah's father testifies. Karanja is officially exonerated. But opening a cell door after 7 years in a maximum security prison brings up a massive logistical and psychological reality.
Yeah, you can't just undo time.
Exactly. You can't just hand a man an apology and expect him to seamlessly re-enter a society that threw him away.
Because the cessation of a punishment is not the same thing as justice.
Say more about that.
Well, the legal system focuses on retributive justice. Punishing the guilty and releasing the innocent. But what this narrative highlights is the necessity of restorative justice.
Restorative justice.
Right, which focuses on repairing the harm caused by the criminal act.
And Mrs. Kiandandu steps into that void in a way that is incredibly rare. She doesn't just offer an apology. She uses her own personal savings to rent a commercial shop for Karanja.
That's amazing.
With the help of well-wishers, she buys him working tools and wood. Because while he was enduring the harsh conditions of Kamiti, Karanja had actually learned to make furniture.
Wow.
He took that survival mechanism and turned it into a livelihood. The source notes he became an expert furniture maker, drawing customers from far away, allowing his fractured family to be made whole again.
Karanja's agency in his own recovery is vital to recognize here.
Yeah, he put in the work.
He utilized the skills acquired during his unjust incarceration to rebuild his economic foundation. but it was Mrs. Kiandandu who provided the initial capital.
Right.
She essentially transferred the wealth accumulated by her husband's illicit empire back to the very person that empire had crushed.
I really want you to ponder the psychological leap she had to make.
It's massive.
What does it take to transition from mourning the man you loved to becoming the ultimate champion for the stranger your husband destroyed?
That's the real question.
She had to publicly accept that her lifestyle was funded by narcotics and murder. By financing Karanja's new life, she was actively tearing down the house she lived in to build a shelter for someone else.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see how the intentional dismantling of a toxic legacy creates space for new sociological structures.
Yeah.
The trauma didn't simply isolate the survivors, right? It forged an entirely new chosen family based on shared truth rather than shared deception.
The source specifically points out the ripple effect of this. Sarah, the young woman who was just looking for a job recommendation in the vestry, becomes incredibly close to Mrs. Kiandandu.
Oh, that's beautiful.
She becomes her best confidant. Sarah found a shoulder to cry on. She became like one of the widow's children, and those children became Sarah's best friends.
It demonstrates that communities can heal, but only after the foundational lies are exposed and addressed.
Absolutely.
Sarah's father found a path out of his paralyzing guilt by testifying. Karanja reclaimed his economic independence, and Mrs. Kiandandu established a new social network that wasn't reliant on her late husband's authority.
So what does this all mean for you navigating your own communities and institutions?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
This story proves that while the truth can be buried deep underground, it possesses a relentless buoyancy.
Buoyancy, I like that.
It slips out in a fragmented, dying breath. It is caught by an unintended ear in a quiet hallway. And it teaches us that true justice requires more than just identifying the villain.
Right.
It requires individuals willing to leverage their own resources, privilege, and comfort to actively rebuild the lives broken by systemic silence.
To synthesize the core mechanics of what we've explored, we observed how cognitive biases and social stratification allowed a drug-smuggling pastor to weaponize his authority and manipulate the justice system. But the counterweight to that corruption was a widow who refused the comfort of willful ignorance, and a community that finally summoned the collective courage to prioritize restitution over reputation.
Next time you walk past a quiet, peaceful building in your neighborhood, maybe a historic church or a grand old home, ask yourself what invisible histories are buried in the foundation.
Yeah.
What load-bearing secrets are holding up the walls? And more importantly, if you held the key to unearthing a painful truth, a truth that could cost you your comfort but save someone else's life, would you have the courage to turn the lock?